"Why is my mother's photo in your mansion?" asked the black girl, and the billionaire was shocked. The question cut through the air like a sharp blade. William Carter, 45, one of the richest men in the country, felt his legs buckle before this 10-year-old child holding a tray of homemade sweets. There was something in her eyes that disturbed him deeply. It wasn't innocence. It was a cold determination far too strange for someone so young. Ava Thompson shouldn't have been there. She definitely shouldn't have been standing in the entrance hall of a mansion worth more than her entire neighborhood would see in a decade. But when the gate opened and that man in the impeccable suit agreed to buy her sweets, she followed the instinct that had been growing for weeks. Her mother, Grace, was dying. Advanced cancer, no money for treatment, living in a shack that barely kept out the rain. Ava had been selling sweets on the streets since she was 8, but lately there had been something different in her steps, something calculated, as if she were looking for clues rather than just customers. And now, standing before that gold-framed photo, all the pieces began to fall into place. The photo showed a radiant young black woman in a white dress, smiling next to the same man who now stared at her in terror. The same woman Ava knew as Grace Thompson, but who, in this photo, seemed to belong to a completely different world. A world of wealth and privilege. Where did you get this photo?" William stammered, his hands shaking visibly. Ava tilted her head slightly, studying his every reaction with unsettling precision. "That's my mother, Grace Thompson. Do you know her?" Her voice was calm, controlled, as if she already knew the answer but wanted to see how far the lie would go. The silence that followed was deafening. William looked at the girl, then at the photo, then back at Ava. The shape of her eyes, the line of her jaw, even that determined expression. It was impossible to deny the resemblance. "Your mother," he whispered. "She told me she died over 10 years ago. There was an accident, a funeral. Funny, because she's very much alive. Well, technically alive. Cancer is taking care of that." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "But I'm sure someone as wealthy as you already knew that, didn't you?" William felt as if the ground were disappearing beneath his feet. For years, he had mourned Grace. He had built a mausoleum in her memory. He had refused any serious relationship because nothing compared to the love he had lost. But Ava didn't seem surprised or moved. She seemed prepared, as if she already knew exactly what she would find here, as if this conversation was part of a much bigger plan. "How old are you?" William asked, his voice almost inaudible. 10. I'll be 11 next month." Ava smiled, but it wasn't a childish smile. It was the smile of someone who had just confirmed a very important suspicion. Funny how the dates match up, don't you think? William felt the world spin. If Grace was alive and this girl was his daughter, it meant that someone had lied to him. Someone had orchestrated all of this. And from the signs Ava was already showing, she knew it too. The question hammering in his mind was simple and terrifying. What else did this child know that he didn't? And why had she come here alone with this strange confidence, as if she already knew exactly how this conversation would end? William was silent for a moment, processing his daughter's frightening efficiency. In less than 24 hours, she had turned his personal grief into a coordinated investigation. "Are you sure this is safe? If these people really killed my mother, they won't stop there." Ava interrupted. "My mother is dying. Remember, we don't have time to be careful. We have time to be smart." 2 hours later, William sat in an inconspicuous cafe in the city center, watching Samantha Torres review a folder full of documents. The journalist, a 40-year-old woman with sharp eyes and streaks of gray hair, showed no surprise at anything she heard. "Your account confirms some suspicions I've been developing for years," she said, closing the folder. "Victoria Carter wasn't just rich and controlling. She was involved in a network of blackmail and manipulation that extended far beyond the family business." "What kind of network?" William asked. "Bought judges, politicians in her pocket, businessmen silenced. Your mother didn't just separate you from Grace. She destroyed dozens of families to protect the interests of the elite." Samantha looked directly at him. "And Montgomery and Associates were the legal architects of it all." William felt nauseous. How many families? At least 15 documented cases in the last 20 years. Grace was just one of them. Samantha opened the folder again, showing him photos, fake death certificates, and fraudulent contracts. Your daughter didn't just bring her personal story, William. She brought the key that could bring down a decades-long conspiracy. When William returned home, he found Ava in the library, studying city maps and handwritten notes scattered across the table. "How did it go?" she asked without looking up. "Worse than we imagined, and better, too," he said, sitting beside her. "Your mother wasn't the only victim, and now we have an investigative journalist on our side." "Good, because we'll need her." She finally looked up, her eyes shining with a determination that reminded William painfully of Grace. "I called Montgomery and Associates an hour ago. I pretended to be a secretary from another office and got some interesting information." "What information?" "They're planning an emergency meeting tomorrow night. All the partners, plus a few special clients. It seems our little investigation has made them very nervous." Ava smiled. "And nervous people make mistakes." William looked at the map spread out on the table. The routes marked, the times noted. His 10-year-old daughter had turned the library of his mansion into a command center. "What are you planning, Ava?" "Justice, Dad. Real, definitive justice." She used the word dad for the first time, and William felt something break and rebuild simultaneously in his chest. Because if they think a kid from the suburbs and a traumatized billionaire are an easy threat to eliminate, they're about to find out just how wrong they can be. That night, as William tried to sleep, one question hammered at his mind. How did a 10-year-old girl manage to orchestrate an investigation that neither he nor an experienced journalist had thought of? And what else was she planning that she hadn't shared with him yet? Outside, the dark car remained in the same position. But now there were two more. And this time it was the watchers themselves who were being watched by cameras discreetly installed by someone who had clearly learned that sometimes the best defense is knowing exactly who is trying to attack you. The emergency meeting at Montgomery and Associates was scheduled for 8 p.m. that evening. But by 7:45, when the partners entered the conference room, they found something they definitely hadn't expected. Ava Thompson was sitting at the head of the table with an open laptop and a stack of organized documents in front of her. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said with unsettling calm. "I hope you don't mind the change of venue. I thought it would be more appropriate to meet here." Dr. Richard Montgomery froze in the doorway, his face turning pale. "How did you get in here? Where are the security guards?" "Your security guards are a little busy explaining to the police why they were rushing classified documents out of the building." She turned the laptop around, showing a live video feed of the building's entrance. "Funny how nervous people always make the wrong choices when the pressure's on." William entered right behind the lawyers, accompanied by Samantha Torres and two federal agents. The expression on his face was a mixture of paternal pride and utter amazement. "Gentlemen," Samantha announced, "you are officially under federal investigation for conspiracy, blackmail, document forgery, and murder." "This is ridiculous," Dr. Montgomery barked.
"You can't prove anything," Ava smiled. "Can't I? Interesting. Because in the last 72 hours, your own phones have recorded some very revealing conversations." She pressed a key on her laptop. Montgomery's voice echoed through the room. "We need to get rid of the girl before she finds more evidence. If she finds out about the other cases, if she finds out what we did to Carter's mother..." "And there's more," Ava continued, switching to another file. "Dr. Harrison, Victoria Carter was becoming unstable. She threatened to reveal everything if we didn't stop the blackmail. We had no choice but to solve the problem permanently." The silence in the room was absolute. Dr. Harrison loosened his tie, sweat dripping from his forehead. "These recordings are illegal. They can't be used." "Actually, they can." Ava pulled out a folder. Article 18 of the Federal Code, Section 2511. Recordings made on private property when there is reasonable suspicion of criminal activity are admissible in court, especially when authorized by a court order. She showed the official document. "Obtained 3 days ago based on preliminary evidence I gave to the FBI."
William looked at his daughter with a mixture of disbelief and admiration. How did you get a court order at age 10? Technically, Samantha got it. I just provided the evidence. Ava opened another file. Including these bank transfers showing regular payments from Montgomery and Associates to Judge Crawford, the same judge who denied all of Grace's appeals when she tried to contact you. Dr. Montgomery tried to stand, but one of the federal agents forced him back into his seat. You don't understand the Carter family, he said desperately. Victoria paid very well to keep certain people away from her son. It was just business. Business? William's voice trembled with controlled rage. You broke up a family, condemned a woman and a child to poverty, and killed my mother when she tried to confess, and you call that business? And speaking of business, Ava continued relentlessly, I found out you weren't the only ones. 15 families destroyed in 20 years. Always the same pattern. Rich person wants to get rid of a social problem. You fake deaths, bribe officials, threaten victims. She turned the laptop to show a detailed spreadsheet. Estimated total profit, $847 million over 2 decades, divided between this office, corrupt judges, and bought politicians. Dr. Harrison tried one last defense. Even if that's true, the girl is a minor. Her testimony is worthless. Who said it's her testimony? Samantha interrupted, smiling. Ava may be a minor, but she's also William Carter's daughter. And William Carter, as a direct victim of this conspiracy, has every legal right to sue for emotional distress, parental kidnapping, and destruction of family. Furthermore, Ava added, relentlessly, I've contacted the other 14 victim families. They've all agreed to participate in a class action lawsuit. Estimated damages $2.3 billion. The lawyers' faces turned gray. All arrogance evaporated, replaced by pure panic. And there's one more thing, William said, his voice gaining strength. Carter Enterprises has canceled all contracts with any company that uses Montgomery and Associates services. I've communicated this to other CEOs. Word travels fast in the business world. Ava closed her laptop with a satisfying click. Oh, and one last surprise. This meeting is being broadcast live on Carter Enterprises' social media channels. 2 million views so far. Dr. Montgomery looked around the room like a cornered animal. You've destroyed our lives. No, Ava replied calmly. You destroyed your own lives the moment you decided that power and money were worth more than families and human lives. We just documented the process. As federal agents led the handcuffed lawyers out, William approached Ava. How did a 10-year-old girl orchestrate all us? Ava smiled for the first time without sarcasm. You forgot one important thing, Dad. I spent 10 years watching powerful people destroy lives through lies and manipulation. I just applied the same tactics, but this time in the name of justice. But as they celebrated their victory, none of them noticed the man in the dark suit watching from the building across the street, speaking quietly into his phone. The plan has failed. Operation Montgomery has been compromised. Activate the emergency protocol. We have other families to protect. The true extent of the conspiracy was only beginning to unfold, and some very powerful people were not willing to let a 10-year-old child destroy decades of corruption without fighting back. 6 months later, the living room of the Carter mansion had been completely transformed. Grace, now in full remission from cancer, thanks to the best treatment available, was reading quietly in her favorite armchair. Her cheeks had regained their color, and her eyes sparkled with the serenity of someone finally safe. Ava, now 11, was organizing stacks of letters on the coffee table, messages of support from across the country, offers of sponsorship, and invitations to speak about social justice. Her story had inspired an entire generation of children not to accept injustice silently. Another university wanting to give you a full scholarship, Grace commented, opening a gold envelope. Harvard this time. William entered the room with a genuine smile, holding a toplet. Carter Enterprises stock has hit an all-time high. Apparently, our reputation for integrity is attracting investors from all over the world. The live broadcast of the Montgomery and Associates exposure went viral. Over 50 million views. The public not only supported their quest for justice, but turned William and Ava into symbols of how to tackle corruption with intelligence. Dr. Montgomery and his partners had been sentenced to 25 years in prison. Their assets were confiscated to compensate the victimized families. Several corrupt judges and politicians were also facing prosecution. What about the man who was watching us? Arrested yesterday. He was the last pawn in a much larger network that the FBI is dismantling. It seems our little operation opened a Pandora's box that will clean up decades of corruption. Ava smiled, not her calculating smile, but the genuine smile of a child who could finally be a child, knowing her family was safe and together. You know what impresses me the most? Grace said, looking at her daughter. You could have chosen to just quietly reunite us, but you decided that other families deserve justice too. Injustice is like cancer, Ava said softly, her eyes distant but calm. If you don't treat it completely, it comes back stronger. William sat beside the two most important women in his life. So what now, strategist? What's the next plan? Ava smiled, a genuine, childlike smile this time. Maybe we just try being normal for a while. Learn to play video games instead of planning federal investigations. Laughter filled the mansion, real laughter, bright and free, echoing through rooms that once knew only silence and grief. Outside, the morning sun poured over the garden where Grace and William had first reunited. The world seemed new again, touched by hope. Because in the end, Ava's story wasn't about revenge or power. It was about truth, and the quiet strength of a girl who refused to let darkness win. Sometimes justice doesn't come from courts or laws. It comes from those brave enough to light a candle in the dark and keep it burning until others find their way home.